French President Emmanuel Macron says he recognizes that his country bears a heavy responsibility for the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, in which nearly 1 million people had lost their lives in a period of only 100 days. Now, during a recent visit to Kigali, Macron failed to meet the expectations of many who wanted him to apologize for the genocide. An activist working with Rwanda genocide survivors insists that France must apologize.
Donc, ce que nous attendons, c'est une parole forte, claire, de vérité et d'excuses de la part du président de la République.
Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Today. I'm your presenter, Mubarak Heniam. Now, this week's edition is focusing on crimes by two major European powers in Africa. In the first segment of our program, we are analyzing the recent visit to Rwanda by President Macron of France, where he publicly acknowledged his country's terrible responsibility in Rwanda's genocide, but refused to apologize. In the second part of our program, we shall discuss the genocide perpetrated by Germany in Namibia over 100 years ago. Now, to compensate for its atrocities, the German government recently offered an apology and pledged 1.1 billion euros only in financial aid over a 30-year period. The descendants of the genocide victims have rejected the aid offer and are demanding full reparations.
We are living in poverty because of what they did to us at that time. Now we want them to restore our dignity. Reparations must come, and we want our land back.
Join us till the end of our show as our analysts delve deep into these two subjects.
Macron refuses to apologize over Rwanda genocide. Survivors of the 1994 Rwandan genocide say they are disappointed after French President Emmanuel Macron gave no clear apology over his country's role in the massacre of almost 1 million people in the African country. Speaking during a visit to Kigali last May, Macron claimed that France was not an accomplice in the Rwanda genocide and thus refused to offer an apology.
Ceux qui ont traversé la nuit.
Only those who went through that night can perhaps forgive.
Pardonner. Nous faire.
And so could give us the gift of forgiving ourselves.
De nous pardonner.
The French president gave his speech at the Kigali Genocide Memorial Center at Gisozi, where some 250,000 victims of the 1994 genocide are buried.
Macron's visit follows the release in March of a report by a French inquiry panel that said a colonial attitude had blinded French officials, and the government bore a serious and overwhelming responsibility for not foreseeing the genocide. However, the report absolved France of direct complicity in the killings. In April, Rwanda also released a report on France's role in the genocide against the Tutsi.
Raporo yerekeranye n'uruhare rw'Ubufaransa muri genocide yakorewe Abatutsi mu mwaka w'1994. Iyi raporo rero ikigaragaza cyane nuko leta y'Ubufaransa icyo gihe yagize bigaragaza ko hari uruhare yagize kuba yaratumye genocide yakorewe Abatutsi ishobora kuba, kandi byaragaragaraga ko byari byaragaragaye ko iyo genocide ishobora kuba.
For an incisive analysis on this subject, we have contacted Claude Gatebuke, a Rwandan war and genocide survivor and the executive director of the African Great Lakes Action Network. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We also have with us here today Philip Rengens, an author and academic. He has acted as an expert witness on the law and politics of Rwanda, Burundi, and the DRC in national courts in several countries and before the International Tribunal for Rwanda. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, let's start with you, Gatebuke. Why has Macron accepted French responsibility in Rwanda genocide but refused to offer an official apology?
Since the genocide, there's been accusations, including court cases in France, where the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, has been accused of shooting down the plane of his predecessor, President Juvenal Habyarimana. And the shooting of the plane sparked the genocide. So the French have gone back and forth with the Rwandan government with a love-hate relationship. My sense is that Emmanuel Macron does not actually believe in what he's saying, because if he actually did, he would offer an official apology. But I'm sure he wants to leave this hanging over the government of Rwanda, that when they would like to bring up this accusation again of the Rwandan president shooting down the plane in the Rwandan Patriotic Front, which is the party in power, being responsible for the crime that started the genocide, that sparked the genocide, that they could still reopen the case.
Thanks for that. Now, it's quite an interesting viewpoint. Edige Nkuranga, the president of Ibuka, an umbrella organization that connects group aiding survivors of the genocide, has condemned Macron, saying he did not present a clear apology for France's role in the 1994 genocide. Let's now bring in Professor Rengens. Why did Macron refrain from apologizing over France's involvement in the Rwanda genocide?
Well, it may well be that he felt, and he will probably have been advised on that, he might feel that if you offer apologies, a claim for reparations might follow. Remember, the German government apologized for the genocide of the Herero in current-day Namibia, and Germany is now paying pretty hefty reparations. So I suppose Macron didn't want to expose France to a demand for reparations.
Countless thousands of children were slaughtered during the Rwandan genocide that was enabled by France. Proof of the carnage is still visible throughout the country. Across the country, individual killers carried out their work with unfathomable cruelty. A survivor explains here how children were killed.
Yeah, it was full of children, died. They took the children, they dropped on the wall. They put on the wall, like this. You see, these are the blood of children.
If France was to offer an apology to Rwandans over the genocide, what would be the implications?
An official apology, I think, would the implications would be that whoever is a responsible party in the genocide, including France and anybody else that would be shown to have had a role in the genocide, they would actually have to pay reparations. Their officials would have to be taken to court and face charges of genocide. And so I think that's a part of the reason why President Macron is avoiding an official apology. Although I do think that the government of Rwanda itself, the president of Rwanda himself, should also respond to the charges against him about sparking the genocide, because the genocide was sparked by the shooting of the plane, and a lot of his own officers have testified to it, including courts in France.
Official documents, survivors' testimonies, historic reports, books and investigations have made available a barrage of information on France's participation in the Rwanda genocide. Researchers, however, estimate the classified secret documents in the government's archives still hide the truth.
Rwanda has long accused France of complicity in the 1994 genocide, but during Macron's visit to Kigali, President Kagame evidently softened his hardline stance. This is what he had to say after listening to Macron's speech.
His words were something more valuable than an apology. They were the truth.
Well, our last question to you, Professor. Why has President Kagame changed his previous hardline stance on France?
Well, I think both leaders had good reasons to try and establish normal relationships again. As far as Kagame is concerned, he has been, to some extent, I wouldn't say abandoned, but his usual allies, particularly the British and the Americans, have become more and more critical about his politics, about the level of democracy, human rights abuses, etc. It's also, I think, important for France because they have been in part because of the conflict with the Rwandan regime, they have been basically out of Central Africa, or at least out of the Great Lakes region, which is an important region for them because it's a border between Anglophone and Francophone Africa.
Thank you very much, Professor Rengens. Professor is an author and academic, and he is also an emeritus professor of law and politics at the Institute of Development Policy, University of Antwerp. Now, back to you, Claude. Why is President Kagame eager to mend Rwanda's ties with France at this point in time?
Kagame's approaching of France is also a political move, because what has happened is, traditionally, Kagame has been if I can use this word, a puppet of the West. He's been basically a servant of Western governments, the UK and the US being the primary sponsors of Paul Kagame. And in recent years, they've started to distance themselves from Kagame and his government. And because of that, he's looking for new friends. And France itself is losing its influence on the continent of Africa. And Rwanda being one of the former French-speaking countries where France used to have an influence, I think France is trying to recover some territories.
France has deployed thousands of troops in several African countries to ostensibly battle terrorism. But despite this military presence, terrorists and bandits continue to wreak havoc in these countries where French troops are present.
Now, as we wind up, I'm sure you recall that the French military operation during the Rwanda genocide was carried out under the guise of a humanitarian mission. Is history repeating itself in other French military missions in Africa that are being carried out to ostensibly battle terrorism?
You know, you look at so many places where they're involved in the Central African Republic, you know, how close they are with Cameroon and Chad and so many others. And you can tell their reason for being there, and in Libya and Mali and so many other places, their presence is problematic. Even in the Ivory Coast, their history there. It's been when the French go there, again, history repeating itself, they go there really to occupy, to take over, to take control of those countries, to install their puppet leaders, or to turn the leaders there, the current leaders, into puppets that they control and then take control of resources. And they do not actually care about fighting terrorism or saving lives. They are there to serve the interests of France, which are purely economic interest and not interest of saving human lives or even fighting terrorism.
Well, you have it there. France is pursuing selfish economic interests in its renewed engagement with African countries. Thanks a lot for your analysis, Mr. Claude Gatabuke, a Rwandan war and genocide survivor and the executive director of the African Great Lakes Action Network. Now, let's take a short break, and when we come back, we shall discuss the rejection of Germany's genocide deal with Namibia. So don't go away.
Essa terra ninguém pode parar. É como a força de um rio quando desce para o mar. Eu sinto essa força no olhar de uma criança. Ela está dentro de ti, é a força da mudança. Todos numa voz a cantar esta vitória que já é de todos nós, no futuro e na memória. Então levanta a tua mão, vamos juntos nesta dança. Moçambique para a frente, é a força da mudança. Vem aí uma mudança, junta-te a nós e avança. Nhusi é a nova força, nossa fé e confiança. Paz, trabalho e energia, mais saúde e alimento. Com Nhusi presidente, continua o crescimento. Eu
Namibians reject Germany's genocide deal.
From 1904 to 1908, German colonizers waged a brutal campaign of genocide against the Herero and Nama people in present-day Namibia. It was estimated that 65,000 of the 80,000 Herero, that is around 80% of the Herero population, were killed during the genocide. Some 10,000 of an estimated 20,000 Nama were also brutally killed by German colonial forces.
More than a century ago, after these atrocities it committed, Germany has now issued a late apology and promised development aid to those affected. Foreign Minister Heiko Maas says that Germany for the first time recognizes that it had committed genocide in Namibia during its colonial period.
Und im Lichte dieser historischen und auch moralischen Verantwortung Deutschlands werden wir Namibia und die Nachkommen der Opfer um Vergebung bitten. Und als Geste der Anerkennung des unermesslichen Leids, das den Opfern zugefügt wurde, wollen wir Namibia und die Nachkommen der Opfer mit einem substanziellen Programm in Höhe von 1,1 Milliarden Euro unterstützen. Und dabei wird es ganz besonders um Wiederaufbau und Entwicklung gehen. Wir bezeichnen heute diese Ereignisse jetzt auch offiziell als das, was sie gewesen sind, ein Völkermord. Wir bekennen uns damit auch zu unserer historischen Verantwortung.
Many Namibians have rejected the so-called development aid being offered by Germany as compensation for its colonial-era genocide. A Namibian politician says Germany perpetrated the genocide and can therefore not purport to make a just and neutral decision on reparations.
Germany has been dictating. And for me, it was like a case of you have a murderer or a rapist, and this person is the one to decide whether I have raped or not, and should I find myself guilty, what could be the best punishment or verdict that I can give myself. So that is how the whole process was not acceptable to us.
Now, for an incisive analysis of this subject, we contacted Dr. Muginde Kajiua, Secretary General of the Herero Traditional Authority. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Doctor. Now, can you first briefly elaborate to us on how the Nama and the Herero genocide took place in present-day Namibia during the German colonial rule?
The Nama and the Herero genocide is a genocide. The German government issued 2 extermination orders, written, translated in local languages, distributed, and then they implemented their intention as planned or as intended and carried out to the letter. Rounded Hereros and Namas refugees or prisoners of war, put them into concentration camp, ensure that they are put to heavy labor and also hanged, make sure that the population is reduced. In fact, at the end of the genocide, General Lothar von Trotter stated that the Herero nation would never continue to exist as it was. He has completed his role, his job successfully.
Thank you for that, and we'll be back with more.
Germany agreed to pay Namibia 1.1 billion euros as it officially recognized the Herero-Nama genocide. Angela Merkel's government claims the payment amounts to a gesture of reconciliation but not legally binding reparations. Herero and Nama leaders dismissed the deal as a public relations coup because it did not include funds deemed reparations. It has also been hugely disappointing to the Herero and Nama that the funds will be distributed over a period covering 3 decades.
The Herero chief Vekui Rukoro, who died recently of COVID-19, was leading fierce opposition to the offer by Germany. He accused Germany of pursuing a racist policy by refusing to negotiate directly with those affected by the genocide.
And the only difference, Germany is continuing to refuse to sit down with us as victims of their genocide and extermination campaign is because we are black Africans. So it's a racist policy.
Now, Germany has offered a 1.1 billion euro settlement, which has been rejected by the Herero and Nama leaders. Why have they rejected this deal?
We cannot agree to a product within which we are excluded. And in any case, the amount of money that they have agreed to is a slap in the face, is an embarrassment for the Namibian state. It's not even the value of land, over 50 million hectares of land confiscated in Namibia equates that money. The land alone that is taken by the colonizers, it's about 75 billion euros. And that alone, the 100,000 lives that are lost, the displacement of people in the neighboring countries.
Descendants of the affected communities rejected the text of a joint declaration between the Namibian government and Germany, which omitted the word reparation. They also called for the renegotiation of the agreement with a focus on increasing the financial amount offered by Germany.
Now, what do you think should be done for justice to be served to the Herero and Nama people?
We have been consistent that we must revert back to the National Assembly resolution, which was unanimously adopted by the Namibian Parliament, which says the victim communities, the two governments must sit around the table, and the victim communities must be represented by their chosen leaders as victims of genocide, and they must propose and negotiate a package that addresses the needs of the victims wherever they are. So the negotiations must start afresh. We will not accept what is on the table.
Now, as you continue the struggle for the rights of the Herero and Nama communities, what's your message to the international community?
We're calling upon the international communities, peace-loving people that are fighting for justice, restorative justice. We're calling on that community to support us in our struggle for restorative justice. We hope the national governments will put more pressure on Germany to recognize the genocide and pay reparations. We will continue this fight. We will bring it to the United Nations, to the governments of the world, to ensure that Germany is pressurized through political pressure and negotiations, that it recognizes genocide and pays reparation that is due to the victims of genocide in Namibia.
Well, thank you very much, the Secretary General of the Herero Traditional Authority in Namibia. Now, here at Press TV, we shall continue updating you on the continued struggle for reparations by the oppressed Herero and Nama communities in Namibia. Well, that brings us to the end of yet another edition of Africa Today. It's been great having you watching, and please do send us your comments through our social media handle. Thanks a lot, and goodbye for now.